In over a decade of watching Roman Reigns operate at the top of WWE, there is a very short list of things he has done that have genuinely stopped the room. Moments where the move was so unexpected, so completely outside the expected parameters of who Roman Reigns is and how the bloodline operates, that the only honest response is to sit with it for a moment before trying to explain it. Roman Reigns walking into the MFT locker room at the O2 Arena in London and offering Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loa a spot in the bloodline is on that list. Not as an ultimatum, not as a negotiating position designed to extract something from people in a weakened state. Not as a performance staged for cameras or witnesses or the broader WWE audience. Just Roman Reigns, in a locker room, after the show, extending an olive branch to two men who had just watched their faction collapse around them, and meaning it. And then Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loa looked at Roman Reigns, acknowledged his position as the true tribal chief, and said no. No gold, no allies, no faction, no solo, nothing to negotiate from, and still, no. That is the moment this video is about, and it is one of the most quietly extraordinary things to happen in this whole chapter of the Bloodline story. Welcome back to Wrestling Stands. Let's get into it properly. Quick favor before we dive in, if you're enjoying this kind of content, please smash that like button and hit subscribe. Over 98% of viewers watch without ever subscribing. It's completely free for you, but it genuinely means the world to us and helps the channel grow. Already subscribed? You absolute legend, thank you so much. Right, let's go. Let's start with context, because the significance of what happened in that locker room after SmackDown can only be properly felt if you understand the specific position that Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loa were in when Roman walked through the door. These are two men who, just hours earlier, had made one of the most difficult decisions available to a performer within a faction structure. They walked out. After weeks of watching Solo Sikoa's obsession with Roman Reigns drag their collective into situations that served nobody's interests except Solo's personal vendetta, after Solo cost them their WWE Tag Team Championship match against Damian Priest and R-Truth, after the accumulation of interferences and distract irons and a leader who had stopped being a leader and started being a one-man civil war, Tamar and Tanga Loa drew the line. They cited the elders. They said we're out. And they left Solo standing alone in that corridor with two words and the knowledge that the MFT was finished. Walking away was the right call. That much is clear. But walking away left them in a specific and uncomfortable place, completely without structure. No faction, no championship, no immediate pathway. Everything they had built within the MFT, whatever status and positioning they had accumulated, whatever momentum the tag team had been developing, was now sitting in the wreckage of an organization that collapsed because its leader's personal obsession overrode every other consideration. That is the position they were in when Roman Reigns knocked on the locker room door. From Roman's perspective, the timing was almost surgically perfect. Two talented performers at their most receptive to a compelling alternative. Their immediate past made unavailable to them by choice. Their immediate future uncertain. Roman arriving in that specific window, with Jacob Fatu beside him, representing the stability and the structure and the legitimacy that the MFT always lacked. It is the kind of move that Roman Reigns in his prime makes look inevitable in retrospect, even though nobody saw it coming in the moment. Let's talk about the offer itself, because how Roman made it matters as much as what he offered. He did not come in hot. Roman Reigns, who has demonstrated throughout this whole saga that he is perfectly capable of arriving in a space with force and consequence when the situation requires it, chose a completely different register for this encounter. He acknowledged the talent. He respected what Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loa are as performers and as family members in the broader Polynesian wrestling lineage that connects so many of these stories at their roots. And then he offered them a place. Not a position beneath him in the traditional hierarchical sense of the word, not the enforcer slot, not the utility role that exists to serve the tribal chief's agenda. A place as family, within the bloodline, the thing that the original faction has always claimed to be at its core and has sometimes been at its best, not just a faction, but an actual family with actual bonds and actual obligations that run in both directions. The fact that Roman made the offer at all is the thing worth sitting with first. Because the Roman Reigns of 18 months ago, the Roman operating at the absolute peak of his control over the bloodline and over the broader WWE landscape, would not have needed to make this offer. He would not have needed to recruit, to extend olive branches, to go to people's locker rooms and acknowledge their talents and appeal to their sense of family. That version of Roman had people coming to him, proving themselves worthy of the bloodline's association, earning their position rather than being invited into it. This Roman made an offer. And what that tells us about where Roman perceives his position to be, about what the Solo Civil War and the Abarfimi threat and the various pressures of this period have cost him in terms of resources and numbers, is more revealing than anything Roman would say explicitly in a promo. He needs the numbers. He needs credible talent aligned with him. He went to that locker room because the Bloodline, as currently constituted, would benefit from the addition, and Roman is honest enough with himself to act on that assessment even when acting on it requires a degree of reaching out that does not come naturally to him. That vulnerability, visible in the very act of making the offer, is something the old Roman would never have put on display. And then Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loe said no. Let's dwell on this, because I think the instinct when you hear it is to move quickly past it, to treat it as a surprising plot beat that sets up whatever comes next and get on to the analysis of implications. But the refusal itself deserves proper attention, because what these two men communicated in saying no to Roman Reigns, with nothing to back them up and everything to potentially gain from saying yes, is genuinely remarkable. They expressed respect. Clear, direct, unambiguous respect for Roman as the true tribal chief, which is itself significant, given that the entire MFT narrative had been built on the premise of Solo Sikoa's rival claim to that position. Tamar and Tanga Loe, in that locker room, formally acknowledged what Solo spent months trying to deny: Roman Reigns is the tribal chief. The original, the legitimate one, but acknowledging that did not mean they were ready to be under it. They wanted to build their own thing. They wanted to grow independently, to prove themselves on their own terms, to construct something that was entirely theirs before they stood beside wrestling's most dominant dynasty. They were not rejecting Roman Reigns. They were choosing to earn the right to stand beside him rather than accepting the invitation before that earning was complete. That is a specific and sophisticated kind of pride. It is the pride of people who understand the difference between being part of something and deserving to be part of something, and who are not willing to shortcut the second step by jumping to the first. The Bloodline, at its most meaningful, is not just a faction you join, it is a status you reach. And Tamar and Tanga Loe have apparently decided they are not there yet. There is something deeply admirable about that, even as it leaves them in the most exposed possible position. It would have been so much easier to say yes. It would have solved their immediate problems: the lack of structure, the loss of direction after the MFT collapse, the uncertainty of what comes next. Roman's offer was genuinely attractive, made from a position of respect rather than condescension. They said no anyway. Here is the part of this that I want to sit with at length, because it carries implications that extend far beyond the immediate situation. By refusing Roman's offer, Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loe have positioned themselves in a genuinely unusual space in this story. They are not aligned with Roman. They are not aligned with Solo, who they just walked away from. They are not aligned with Seth Rollins and the new Solo Rollins partnership that formed in the gorilla position on the same night. They are not aligned with Abarfimi, who is operating on his own trajectory aimed at Roman's championship. They are aligned with nobody, which in the short term sounds like a liability and in the medium term could turn out to be one of the most interesting positions available in the whole landscape. Because here is what nobody aligned with nobody actually has: freedom. The freedom to make their own choices about who they work with and when and why, without the obligations and the restrictions and the complex loyalties that come with being inside any of the existing structures. Tamar and Tanga Loe can be exactly what the moment requires. They can be allies when alliance serves them, rivals when that serves them, and wildcards when the story needs disruption from an unexpected angle. They also have something else that is worth naming: Roman's awareness that they turned him down without burning the bridge. The conversation ended with a hope for reunion down the line, once they have proven themselves. Roman heard that. Roman, who understands long-term positioning better than anyone in this business, filed that away as information about who Tamar and Tanga Loe are and where their ultimate allegiances sit. That information could be useful to Roman at any number of future moments. The door is not closed. The relationship is deferred rather than severed. And a relationship with Roman Reigns that is deferred rather than severed is, in this story, an asset with future value. Let's talk about what all of this reveals about the current shape of the Bloodline and where its vulnerabilities actually sit. Roman went to that locker room. That is the fact we need to return to, because everything else flows from it. Roman Reigns made an offer to Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loe because he assessed the current composition of the Bloodline and found it wanting. He looked at what he has, the Usos, Jacob Fatu, the reformed original family, and concluded that the Solo Rollins alliance, combined with the Abarfimi championship threat, represents a level of pressure that the current numbers cannot comfortably manage without reinforcement. That is a Bloodline that is, for possibly the first time in a long time, feeling the weight of what it is managing. Not crumbling, absolutely not. The reformed Bloodline is more unified than it has been in months, as the SmackDown ambush demonstrated. But unified and sufficient are different things, and Roman's locker room visit suggests he is aware of the distinction. The rejection from Tamar and Tanga Loa does not solve that problem. If anything, it crystallizes it. Roman tried to expand the roster and was declined. The Solo Rollins partnership is now operational. Femi is the king of the ring with a guaranteed title shot. And the Bloodline, for all its reformed unity, is going into the summer with the same numbers it came into it with, facing threats that have been multiplying rather than diminishing. Roman will find another answer. He always does. But the fact that the first answer was declined tells you something about the tightness of his current margin. There is one more thread here that I want to follow before we close, and it is the one about what Solo Sikoa makes of all this when he finds out. Solo was cast out of the MFT by Tamar and Tanga Loa, citing the elders. The Tongans walked away from him with finality and coldness and the specific kind of institutional authority that word from the elders carries in the Samoan wrestling lineage. Solo's desperate plea was met with 2 words and a departing back. And then, on the same night, Roman Reigns walked into the Tongan locker room and offered them a spot in the family. If Solo learns the details of that conversation, and in the close quarters of the WWE locker room, information travels, he is going to receive it as one of the sharpest possible indications of where his stock currently sits. The people who just left him were immediately deemed worth recruiting by Roman Reigns. The people who walked away from Solo Sikoa were good enough for the Bloodline on the same night they told Solo they were done. That is a specific and pointed message about comparative value, even if it was not intended as one. And Solo Sikoa, now sitting in the gorilla position with his new Seth Rollins alliance and his burning hatred for Roman still fully operational, is going to feel the meaning of that detail whether he articulates it or not. The rejection of Solo's MFT and the rejection of Roman's offer are 2 different kinds of no that happened on the same night in the same arena. Both of them matter. Both of them shape what happens next. What happened after SmackDown in London was not a main event. It was not a championship match or a brawl or a dramatic confrontation visible to the paying audience. It was a conversation in a locker room, unaired, between people making decisions about the future of their careers in the private space that exists just outside the show. Roman Reigns made an offer from a position of genuine respect and latent need. Tamar Tonga and Tanga Loa refused it from a position of genuine pride and long-term thinking. The door was left open with a specific kind of hope attached to it, a reunion when the time is right, when they have earned the standing beside the dynasty. It is a small moment in the geography of a very large story, but small moments told honestly often carry more weight than the large ones designed to carry it. Because in that locker room, without cameras and without an audience and without the performance that professional wrestling requires when the lights are on, 2 men said no to the most powerful offer available to them in WWE right now. They said no because they believed in what they were building, what they are going to build, something that is entirely, undeniably, completely theirs. In the Bloodline story, that kind of self-belief has historically had one of 2 outcomes: it either makes you a legend, or it makes you an example. We are going to find out which. Cheers for watching, it genuinely means the world. We'll see you in the next one.